Right. Well, I wanted more of a flowery lawn, but times are different. But I still believe that a better digital world is still possible despite everything. Let's start with what we are here. We have a Ministry for Digitalization and Government Modernization, and the history of our digital ministries is a history of misunderstandings and experiments. It started in 1998. Who remembers that? That was Jo Stolman, an internet entrepreneur from the new economy, who was in the shadow cabinet of Gerhard Schröder before he got elected as chancellor. But as soon as he got elected, he was replaced by some other minister. And for many years then, we didn't really have anyone that was competent, and the first publica happened soon. And then in 2007, Michael Gloß opened the CeBIT conference. The economic minister, who was also the digital minister, working the mobile phone. Well, fortunately, I have people that work the internet for me, that operate everything, and I have very talented children in that area who will surely teach me a little. That was the time when Interior Minister Schäuble said that the internet is like a telephone switchboard, and the Justice Minister, Brigitte Zypries, told a children's reporter that she didn't quite know what the browser was, and none of in society. Everyone was kind of hoping that this internet thing would soon be over. And in 2010, the then Interior Minister de Maizière invited for a commission of inquiry in Parliament. That minister was out of his job soon after because Theodor zu Guttenberg had copied too much and had to be replaced as the defense minister. In 2013, a new government, which in 2014 announced a digital agenda. Here we see the three internet ministers that we had at the time. There were more of them even, but these three gentlemen were internet ministers because they were the three parties that were involved in that coalition government at the time. It was full of flowery formulations, and whatever was announced was then soon buried after. In 2017, there was a new strategy. People were just throwing anything what the ministers did together and called it an implementation strategy. And then suddenly there was a coordination in the Chancellor's office where the attempt was to have a central institution with Mr. Braun. He tried to coordinate the development. Dorothee Bär was given a state minister's jobs for digitalization but didn't have much power. But there was a digital council that was supposed to advise the government, and what came of that we all know. We're still waiting. Well, I'm still waiting for a fiber connection. And e-government, we still know that from TV mostly, when other countries are being reported about. Then the red, green, yellow coalition came with the most ambitious program of all. We were quite surprised positively when we read that the only thing we had to campaign for was to keep those promises. And then 3 years later, everyone was kind of disappointed because all of those beautiful words had not been put into practice. Chances had been missed. Thank you to the Liberal Party, the FDP. And now everything is different. Again, there is a real digitalization ministry, not just an add-on that was kind of negotiated into the treaty in the last moment. We have a coalition treaty that many of us would not sign these days, where the panacea, the promise is that AI is going to solve all problems. We just have to throw money onto it and then we'll solve all the problems. That is the brief summary of the coalition treaty when it comes to digital issues. We have a digital minister who has this name, but actually we have three in effect, not from three different parties this time. We have Carsten Wildberger, the actual minister, who comes from the economy, and who is a person of the economy, and where it's not quite clear whether he'll be a partner of civil society. So in other words, does he know society? Does he know minister? We will have to wait and see. On the left, we have Dorothee Bär as the research minister, who is in a way the second digital minister, although it isn't in her name. And then we have Alexander Dobrindt, who is responsible for all these surveillance measures as the interior minister, and there will be quite a lot of those, many because every red-green coalition will bring all those evergreens of surveillance back on the agenda with each new government period or parliamentary period. And Karlsruhe, the Constitutional Court, will have a lot to do and declare all these new laws in violation of the Constitution. But that's not where we are quite yet. We are in the announcement stage. We have this ordinance here for the coalition that explains all the projects they want to do. That's quite interesting, and also interesting to observe what will then happen, what could happen if this much power is bundled in one place, because the problem even in the last legislative period was that everyone was kind of responsible for internet development, but nobody felt responsible really. So in other words, if something wasn't related to an individual person, everyone was just ducking and avoiding things, and were just getting into their trenches, trench warfare, and fighting each other, even if they're actually led by the same party, and so on and so on. So for the first time now, we have a strong digital ministry where many departments of the Interior Minister has been transferred to. Basically everything from the Chancellor's office. So Friedrich Merz probably, obviously, isn't really interested in the digital, and he's delegated it all to Carsten Wildberger, the minister, and some things have been put into the Research Ministry. The Research Ministry received everything, every responsibility that was about money beyond the digitalization budget. So everything, innovation support, high-tech factories, computer game industry, quantum technology, everything related to future and modern is being given to Dorothee Bär. In other words, Bavaria will be given more tax money because that's where Dorothee Bär comes from. There are a few uncertainties regarding future responsibilities divided into the different ministries. Who will actually be responsible for data protection? Who will be looking after the Agency for Internet Security? Is that the Interior Ministry, the Digital Ministry? Or will it be both? At some moments, we'll have to see a certain struggle develop, I'm sure. I have already said it. We had an ambitious red, green, yellow coalition that wanted to support digital basic rights, and we have to praise them. They actually managed to not bring out many new surveillance laws, but at the end of their time, they really struggled hard to actually get some of these onto the agenda, but they also brought this overall balance sheet of surveillance onto the agenda, a long existing promise where an institute was commissioned by the Justice Ministry to actually put together what actual surveillance laws there are in all the various places, because that is what the Constitutional Court had actually remarked. When new laws are put into place, they would like to know what is actually the overall level of surveillance. To judge the individual law is a different thing from actually looking at the whole picture and the whole surveillance laws that are around and the effect whether this new law will actually pass a tipping point. So that is what this overall overview is for. We have a databases now, not ideal. The police authorities were supposed to cooperate and supply all their figures, but they didn't really want to be observed in that way and didn't supply anything. But there have been processes and structures put into place that may make it possible to easier identify what surveillance we have and how much our liberty is endangered. And it is endangered much more because every red-green coalition, as I've said, will always manage to take big steps into the surveillance state, and that starts with biometric face recognition. For certain reasons, certain purposes, with constitutional concerns taken into account, an automatic research and biometric matching with available data and using AI is supposed to be put into place. In other words, every photo that you upload will be used to feed the surveillance state in the future, or it may be used for that. And there's also remote identification and so on. It's all a small problem. Well, in fact, it's a big problem. I think that is actually one of the biggest threats if we are no longer able to move in public space without being under threat of being automatically captured and identified using biometrics. And this is actually happening already at railway station using the railway police or the border police. And close to the borders, the German states are taking steps. There is the AI Act that bans all this, but it only bans real-time recognition. And there are then wordings talking about exceptions. And of course, this is a very loose term, real time. If you insert a few seconds delay, is that real time? If there's a 10-second delay, no, surely you can then do all that surveillance. That's the way they operate. And that's the way they shape the laws underlying their operations. And this permeates into the private sphere using Meta, Google, and co. They are all offering wonderful glasses, smart glasses, and everyone is saying, I, as someone wearing glasses, would like to have these glasses, perhaps, because I have a hard time recognizing or remembering faces. But I don't want you to identify me, on the other hand. That is the core of the problem. There are no solutions for that. There is data retention, which is back on the agenda, 3 months of IP address and port number storage. IP addresses are this one thing, and port numbers is this whole long list of what actual services we've just used. Much larger capture than just IP addresses. At least location data is not involved in this, because that is clearly in violation of the Constitution. And the deadlines of 3 months is much more than the security authorities say they need. There's a kind of negotiation struggle, and one says we need 6 months, the other person says less than that, and so they arrive at 3. And I think the strategy is, well, let's just see what the Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe says. Let's see what they take out of our laws, and maybe what's then left will be a good foundation for us to work. And the sad thing is that the Red, Green, Yellow coalition didn't manage, the Social Democrat, Green, Liberal coalition didn't put quick freeze into place. That is the way of getting access to this data without actually storing it by just on the off chance. And the Minister for, Justice, made clear that there is no way to trust her, because she said that storing IP addresses is not about mass storage. What does the whole blanket storage of IP addresses of all internet users mean for 3 months if that is not mass storage? A few other interesting words. Severe crimes are the only ones that would allow access. Child pornography and terrorism, the argument gets repeated ever and ever, but we need clear legal borderlines, and this is what she's supposed to have studied with a PhD. Or are you just going to veil the fact that this is going to be about very different crimes? Because severe and most severe, there are various terms here, and what is probably going to be affected is not just these things that everyone would agree to, such as child pornography or child abuse images and terrorism, but it will be much more. And what is still on the table is chat control. Chat control is supposed to affect those operating encrypted communication, including Signal and Threema, by the way, and they are then supposedly going to be compelled to hand over this data to the security authorities. And what kind of sense does it make in days like this to put in backdoors to make this possible? If our security authorities are able to get in via some backdoor, who else is going to be able to go in through this backdoors, and who's going to be interested in that? So in other words, we are creating massive insecurity in the name of security if chat control is going to come. The last government was fighting against this quite actively through the Justice Ministry, but I'm not so hopeful regarding the new government. Another question, why is it still legal that when we download apps and, well, we click on, would you like to use our services? And then in the background, 800 various companies are informed that we are using a gay dating app, for example, where everything, including our location, our sexual preferences, can be used to identify us. That is the reality out there. We are completely monitored, surveilled, because we click accept everywhere. We don't really know what is happening in the background with all this data. And, well, there is this supposed deal. We have a weather app that gives us data, but 800 companies are being informed where we've just been when we were looking at this weather forecast. So these cookie banners are a huge problem too. And at least here there are some judgments. Here's one from last week. there has to be a reject all button. It's so absurd that we have to click all those individual cookies to reject them all, to use our right to privacy, to prevent these 800 companies to know from where we are just getting a weather forecast. But let's get to the actual dominating issue. I'll have to take a sip now. We are all of a sudden, our whole world is dominated by authoritarian leaders. The Steve Bannon strategy in the last term has been replaced by the Trump camp being able, through polarization, through their own right extremist agenda, to get into power. And that shows the challenges that we are facing, because part of their strategy is to create rage and to use it. And part of our strategy is to create an anti-fascist movement against that with each response that we react, with which we react to their provocation. We help them spread their message, even if we stand up against it. And that is a huge dilemma that we're all facing. Every interaction, every counter-reaction, at the same time, furthers their fascist right extremist positions, because these mechanisms, the way the platforms work, is this way, and this is what they've perfectioned and found out, and this is what they are gaming. And they prevent these mechanisms from being changed. Freedom of speech that they are supposedly protecting is the freedom that they imagine to intimidate others with hatred and to exclude others from the public discourse. And they have managed through this to turn this censorship narrative into the opposite. By crying out about censorship, they manage to actually scare off other people that have a right to be heard in the public discourse without having to live with threats and the like. So I'm quite happy that I'm living in Germany, because our freedom of speech only goes as far as the rights of others are touched. It's not all-encompassing. Donald Trump is in office. The tech oligarchs are collecting around him, sitting on his lap, to find support. And the digital world, since the second victory of Donald Trump, has been the central arena of the way our world is shaped. Its rules and the way it's being enforced are the key to secure the democracy against its enemies. And that is why I'm saying let's prevent our rules. That's why they prevent these rules from being democratically enforced. And the most absurd thing wasn't this 1 million that was paid to be standing in second place at the inauguration. It was Jeff Bezos who managed, by paying $40 million to buy the rights to a Melania Trump story at Amazon. And that is corruption as it's at its best. There were some cartoons that were suppressed, like this one. Mark Zuckerberg then spoke up and said, "Hello, I'm around too, and I'm Donald Trump's biggest fan, and I'm doing everything that he's telling me to do." And it went through the media that he, was going to abolish fact-checking and replace it with community notes. And from research and experience, we know that community notes are a practical thing to do in Wikipedia, but they don't work when it's about political content and actual communication. Everyone that tells you that community notes are a good solution just want to save money and don't want certain actors to be caught lying, which fact-checkers often do. And the softening of content rules and make discrimination and racism being officially allowed at Meta, the family-friendly network, or speaking in the words of Mark Zuckerberg, we are adapting our rules to the mainstream.
Yeah, and so in this PR offensive, he tried to be a real cool guy. And it was just like, yep, of course we're friends with Trump now. Do you want to help us, to stop the evil EU from enforcing any rules on us? And then, of course, we have Elon Musk, who, in his love letters to the European Commission, showed what he was about. We all remember the phrase, fuck your own face, which was the highlight of that. And then we have Peter Thiel, the guy behind Palantir, which still is supposed to be implemented in various governments around Europe. And because people just don't get, with what sort of company they collaborate in that case. And Peter Thiel also was successful in placing the vice president of the current U.S. administration. So it might very well be the case, if Trump were to die within the next 3 years, that his guy would become president. And so in the U.S., we can see what happens if there's a sudden rise of a fascist regime. There's this presidential letter that Elon Musk gets and then just walks into all the ministries and all federal offices and to exfiltrate data. And with the underlying goal of creating deportation lists, amassing data from various sources in order to deport people and to have them be deported as fast and as efficiently as possible. And they also want to look at what happens on social media, because you can use the interfaces of social media apps and then also take that into account. And so, for example, see how critical a person was of the current fascist government. And that, of course, is a move against the freedom of expression. So here I've called that a coup using software and not weapons. So what were to happen in Germany, if the AfD came to power, the right-wing AfD party? And of course, it's only going to be men that would be in charge of various offices in government. And what were they to do? And what could we do against them? And I don't think we're ready for government workers in Germany to break the rules, to knowingly break rules on a large scale. And I really think we have to prepare ourselves for that. And we always talk about the right to privacy as a nuisance, but really it shows that minimizing data is sort of an escape route when the building is on fire. Because one question matters in the end. What sort of data is still around on the servers and that can be used against us? And of course, in the US, there's lots and lots of big data, stuff like that, right? So, for example, when you try to enter the US at the border right now, they also scrape our social media profiles and create this sort of risk profile. Do we want to let this person in or not? Oh, look at that guy. He deleted all the social media profiles, but of course we still have all the data from the servers, right? Yeah, and so then you just have to book another flight home. So enjoy your trip to the US. The EU tried for a long time to not really enforce any rules. So this tweet aged very badly. And of course, Elon Musk always said, to adhere to all the rules that the EU set up. But, the EU the Commission didn't take it seriously enough. And so we now have all these rules by the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. But we're also in a trade war, right? Because Trump goes around and everywhere he's raising tariffs or threatening tariffs. And so we're facing this challenge that there's this little problem, right, when it comes to platform regulation. The EU Commission is the one who is supposed to enforce these rules, but at the same time, they're in trade talks with the US, trying to prevent a trade war. And so obviously, it seems like they might give up the enforcement of these DSA and DMA rules in order to save certain trade profits and prevent tariffs from being even higher. And we don't have an independent office to actually enforce all these rules, right? And so that's something that we lack. And so I'm really like, how long will the people in the Commission take to find out that, you know, Elon Musk manipulated X in order to raise awareness for his own tweets? Like, it's so obvious. Yeah, but so maybe at some point, you know, that they'd come to the conclusion that that was sort of not okay, what he did. But we have the situation right now where we have to expect that Elon Musk on X, you know, he can create attention for content that he likes, that's close to his own ideology, to his own political viewpoints. And Sarah Wine Williams wrote a book, Facebook whistleblower, called Careless People. And she talked about discussions on the board of Facebook, whether, you know, they should sort of like push AfD content in Germany, because the AfD, their political ideas, should they come to power, would, you know, that would benefit Facebook and their economic interests. And so really the DSA is about us getting to know what happens, but we don't have the regulation. And so, for example, the Digital Services Coordinator in Germany at the Bundesnetzagentur, they were supposed to hire 99 people, and I think it's like 3 at the moment, because some bureaucratic commission didn't allow any more to go through. And so we're just not able to face these threats on the level. And so it's really a question of, will this work? Will this be enough? Especially when all these companies, you know, try to fight the regulation. So we just don't know. And instead, the situation we're in right now, you know, we have to expect all the algorithms on the big platforms to be manipulated by the companies and people behind them. And I don't think the DSA is the proper countermeasure. Because, of course, it's about economic interest, right? We have to ban personalized ads. That would really be a hindrance to the current model of big social media platforms. And then they would have to change a lot. And so we have the Digital Markets Act, which is sort of like the little sibling of the DSA, but it could be much, much more powerful because it's about limiting market power of big companies. And so we now had these measures being taken against Apple and Meta, and I think that was really that was luck, basically. Because 1 year ago, the EU, before Trump 2.0, they told these companies to fix the mistakes that they made, and if they weren't to be fixed, then they would have to pay a fine. And so they didn't fix anything, and then they had to pay. And the fine can be like, you know, up to 10% of the money made in the European area. Which, of course, is a tiny, tiny fraction of the money that they have total. And so we really have to try to counter these monopolies and have more sort of competition in the marketplace. And tomorrow, right here, we're going to have a discussion on this topic, where I'm going to talk with a few guests and ask them, you know, how is this supposed to work? And how is this sort of a failure? Because, you know, it's a lot of projection when we talk about how regulation works or how it doesn't. So current topic, who here hasn't yet rejected on Instagram, on Facebook, because Mark Zuckerberg, he wants to have the right to use all the data on Facebook, on Instagram to train his AI. And instead of, asking for consent, which should be quite obvious, they're automatically opting you in. And so if you know how to opt out of that, how to click through all of those forms, then you can still do that. And a German court in Cologne last week, decided that was not okay. And I think that's also like a symbol for the level of enforcement of data and privacy protection that we have right now. Because, Meta, they create a lot of jobs, they pay taxes, and so there's not much happening there. And so this is like a little thing you can do to resist in a small way. And so we're at a crossroads. 12 years ago, there was also this sort of time frame where we discussed, we might have this problem if the Americans are constantly surveilling us. But then, we still wanted to be friends, and so we're still friends with the Americans. And we decided to not create any sort of European digital sovereignty. What could go wrong? And so suddenly everything goes wrong. And we can't trust all of this infrastructure anymore. We're so dependent on single companies that we can't really control anymore. And so there's this idea of creating European digital sovereignty. For example, this Eurostack idea, where we fund lots and lots of industry, hardware, software, in order to be able to build all of this ourselves. And we could have done this years ago, but instead we kept paying royalty to Microsoft. And so at least what is being talked about right now in the political sphere, maybe, that's actually not the worst idea. Let's have some discussions and panels on the topic and, have a summit, have a European summit and talk about Eurostack and get together and talk about this. It's better than nothing. Just, do that. And the day after tomorrow, Francesca Pria, one of the people behind this Eurostack idea, is going to talk about that. We need our own cloud infrastructure, our own hardware infrastructure, independent software, open source software, best of all. And I think, the key really lies in systems that are interoperable. And I'm fully convinced that public procurement is so important. And there we need to stop buying American software and buy European. Because we know that American software can be just shut off if Trump doesn't like you anymore. And that's a risk we shouldn't be willing to take right now. But, in federal offices, we're fully dependent on Microsoft. So the German government has this idea of Deutschland stack, so a German stack for hardware and software. But, and they want to start with public offices. And because, Microsoft is running all of those things. And so they want to change it. And there's a sort of time frame right now and a little hope that, the federal system that we have here in Germany to sort of maybe change the constitution or at least enable the federal government in some way to create these central systems, right? In order to not have lots and lots of isolated solutions in the individual states and counties, because that costs lots and lots of tax money and it doesn't really, change the status quo in any meaningful way. And so that could really lead to becoming more independent from big companies?
Well, and some relevant groundwork is this umbrella strategy that was resolved. We see that many people are coming together in Germany to come up with strategies. This is the new digital ministers conference that said, well, it would be a good thing. The federal level and the German state should work towards open standards and open formats to have a sustainable IT where it is technically possible and where procurement of software can prioritize non-proprietary software. And that is a demand that we've had on the very first Republica, and now finally it is an official one. And the only thing that would now have to be done is to implement it. And then there is the Centre for Digital Sovereignty of government agencies. They are developing a cooperative platform, and the online suite Open Desk could be the basis. There are German states like Schleswig-Holstein and Thuringia who are paving the way and transforming. We should have done this much earlier, but we completely went into this dependency of Microsoft, and we have been using Microsoft products and buying them all the time because everyone did it, and this was how it went for 30 years. Microsoft had some very effective lobbying, and now Donald Trump is able to tell Microsoft, well, just switch off this infrastructure. And Microsoft won't have an alternative than to comply. Not even the German branch of Microsoft. Even if they said, well, we have this German company that operates in Germany and the servers are in Germany, the great GDPR is in force. Well, no, that won't work. US government has a different understanding of the law. Is a subsidiary of a US company, is of course part of that US company and has to do what the president tells it to do. There is, going back to platforms, there's always this idea that we need a European platform for whatever, and it's a great idea in principle. I would like a European platform for anything, something, but we don't have to make the mistake to put too much hope in our institutions that are so complex in Germany to work better, especially at the European level. These are things that look like a cathedral. And this is what Eric Raymond, as early as 1999, said in a fantastic essay. In software development, there are these cathedrals, Windows. That's a cathedral where people work on something big and monolithic. It can go well, it can go wrong. Quite often it does. And German government IT projects have been these cathedrals where lots of money has been poured into companies such as Siemens IT systems, and a few years later, you don't want to know what became of it because they turned into ruins. And as an alternative, there is this bazaar. And this is using various components, using open standards in competition to each other. Email is one of those. Everyone can set up their own email server or use someone's email server, and you can communicate using open standards. And there is Wikipedia that shows, using the Wikimedia community, that you can share knowledge in a very varied way. OpenStreetMap, very different ways. And in the same way, German public broadcasters should have built a platform like this 20 years ago. They are now working on it. But at least the realization has been there. The various archives of broadcasting material are now going to be joined together, where in the past 16 German states had 16 independent developments. How was this ever supposed to work? But now someone has the right idea. And the ZDF, the public broadcaster, TV broadcaster, commissioned an expertise what the role of public broadcasters should be in the current situation. They should be able to provide for a decentralized, independent society and be an alternative to privatized monopoly platforms. It would be a good thing. A few things are being done. Public Spaces Incubator is a nice idea. ARD and ZDF, the broadcasters are involved. But if you look at the amount of money that's being put into it, it's not 10% of the overall budget, which would probably be necessary to kind of modernize the public system for the 21st century. It's about 0.1% of the overall budget, and that is far too little. And there are these tender plants, Media Lab Bavaria, Mastodon projects, small projects for innovation support, maybe €10,000 to improve public infrastructure, that is a so small tender plant. But it's about the best we have at the moment, and that you have to imagine as on a far bigger scale to achieve a large-scale platform for the common good. These exist as small plants, but in a way they don't interoperate as well as we would imagine it, but they could interoperate better if we were to use them, if we were to move over to them, and if we would shape them in a way that would want us to move. And that would make us want to move. And if you do social media for whomever, use a free platform. At least in addition, there is this initiative by Stockmann. It should be compulsory for all public services, media people, to use at least one free network and put content there. If you use the others, such as X, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and whatever, and content that is financed by us, if that is shared there, then it also has to be shared in a platform that is oriented towards the common good. Some time ago, I left netzpolitik.org, the website that I co-founded after many years, because I wanted to take time to see what do we actually need, what's missing. Can I use my experience and my knowledge to work for a better digital world? For example, by shaping this program or beyond that. And the situation is that we have a few companies in the hand of a few billionaires controlling digital infrastructures that we depend on, determining what we communicate, what we see, what is visible. Their interests decide the visibility of debates, of information. Their algorithms follow the logic of profit, not of the common good. And that is what is threatening our democracy and our fundamental rights. So we need a competition. And we have the situation that in Germany we have a very strong digital civil society. I have co-founded some of these organizations. I have co-developed or accompanied some of them in their development. We have a civil society that is stronger than perhaps in any other country. I'm not so sure about Brazil. Anyway, we have lots of very active people and organizations and initiatives that are well networked and work for digital rights and for transforming things towards the common good, but still we are not being heard enough. And I believe the digital civil society has a problem. And it is a communication and a visibility problem. Very often we stick in our well-accustomed issues. We sound too technical, too complex, too much removed from everyday life. Many of our issues are not really understood by people. They don't really know that they are affected by these issues. And beyond our filter bubble, in the large discourse, other stories are dominant. Narratives of new features, massive PR, supporting big infrastructures with the big tech and their power. We cannot even imagine what a democratic infrastructure in the net would look like and what we want to have. Just as in the analog age, we couldn't imagine walking on streets that belonged to someone else and then someone else actually making the rules. We have a massive lobbying power. This is just one example. The 10 biggest digital corporations have spent 10 times as much for lobbying in Brussels as the motoring industry's lobbying organizations. And they have more money, put in more money than fossil fuel and motoring industry together, and they are listened to. The IT industry has much more access to politicians than civil society does. And I believe that we have to get out of the bubble. We can't just warn, but act. We can't just analyze, but create a public awareness. We must talk about public fundamental rights in a way that it is tangible to everyone. How can we apply pressure on companies and government institutions? How can we break through the narrative power of big tech with democratic counter-narratives? These findings and my experience, I'm now going to get into, pour into a new project. With Campact, we founded the Center for Digital Rights and Fundamental Rights, and we want to establish digital rights as fundamental rights. We want to do more for a human-centered digital politics against this, well, overbearing power of industry and big tech that is always telling us something different than what we actually want and need. Politics and media seem overwhelmed a lot. There is a lack of competency. They are reacting rather than shaping actively. Politics, in my experience after 16 years of the Conservatives governing under Angela Merkel, politics only reacts when there's a medial discourse, when there is pressure in the media, when they have to react. Because otherwise you're sitting in the back rooms together with the IT industry, or they are sitting there, and they are understanding then digital politics just as economic politics. And many media, in turn, don't know who they should ask to actually put things into perspective, especially when it's about current events. And for that, in the first step, we want to find a solution. We want to create a newsroom for digital rights. We want to educate journalists, multiplicators, and supply them with fast expertise to current developments, structural issues, societal consequences of technology, to make them able to keep them able to speak even when it gets complicated, because it's not just facts and realities. We were talking too much about facts, and this all sounded very abstract. The climate movement and its constructive journalism have really shown us facts are not enough, even if they are undisputable. Only those that create emotions and tell new stories and find new ways of communicating are able to reach people and move those that they haven't reached so far. So we want to create a Center for Digital Rights and Democracy, and we want to have a kind of harmony, a triad of we want to make reality understandable and feelable, and we want to explain individual consequences so that multiplicators and journalists understand what a corporation or politics decision will have and what effect that will have. We want to show solutions, not just criticize. We want to show how it could be better if, for example, there is a problem, a challenge. We also, as another approach, if we get the financing for it, we also want to empower more people. We want to empower citizens to work for their interests, to raise their democratic voice, especially those that haven't been heard enough so far and who are not quite aware what the consequences are on their own lives of those decisions. And we want to create new formats for specific groups and develop them. Why not create something that speaks to over 60-year-olds in their own voice? Use them as presenters, perhaps. Why not use TikTok videos for minors that don't have a large educated background so that they are confronted with our issues and are sensitized and that they realize that they are affected? Why not work with influencers that perhaps would work for digital rights and take their audience by the hand and help them and work for democracy? And as a third approach, we want to start new dialogues and alliances. And we believe that we have to get bigger. We need larger networks beyond those already existing. We need new bridges to actors in civil society beyond the conventional digital rights bubble into the center of civil society. We have to fight for the center of society. So moderate conservative powers, we cannot afford to lose to the right extremist forces, and that's what we want to do. The Center for Digital Rights and Democracy. Our vision is that we believe in a better digital world in where fundamental rights are inviolable. Digital sovereignty is a given, and where everyone can take part in decisions. And we need a strong public. We need people that are in discourse, and where everyone has access to digital infrastructures. That is public, oriented towards the common good, and decentralized. And we need you for that too. A digital haiku. Everyone thinks for themselves. The answer is sadly not. A few big tech companies decide what you see, what you know, and therefore how you think. Doesn't sound like a poem, does it? Right, it's a problem for our democracy. Our thinking and acting has to remain free. The good news is the problem is solvable. Become part of the swarm power and work for digital rights and a just future. Become a swarm power at donations or spenden. I didn't get the last part of the domain, sadly. Spenden.digitalrechte.de. Donations.digitalrights.de would be the translation. We are at the beginning. We have a supporting funding from Campact, which we are very grateful for. We have 3,000 euros per year to start this newsroom. Our challenge is we need 1,000 supporters until the end of the year to step up our operation. We're starting with a small team. We will actually create new jobs and put them on the website and see whether we cannot integrate more capabilities. Until March, we're going to establish our structures and processes. We'll develop new formats, which we will then better test by making them available to you and asking for your feedback to tell us if that works the way we want it to. And then we want to get started.
And if you want to support us, we have various QR codes right here. We have a newsletter which you can subscribe to. You can donate to us. And on Wednesday, we're going to publish the first job openings. We have a meetup on Wednesday at 12:30 to the right of the stage in the meetup area. So yeah, join us, join our swarm. And so I'm getting to the end. For 3 years now, we've done the Be Future Festival, which is held in the German city of Bonn for journalism and a constructive dialogue. That's also going to take place again this year in the fall in Bonn, in various places, in museums and other locations. And of course, my own newsletter is going to keep getting published. So that was that. Enjoy Republica, get active.